Howdy and welcome back once again to the latest edition of Roundup, brought to you proudly by Snowball Esports, myself, and Tuesbees. Good to be back. What's life like now that you're a big famous podcaster?
Can't say it's that much different, to be honest. All I do is just sit here and watch Counter-Strike, evidently by how much I can talk about it in a podcast like this for an hour. So
You're not getting recognized in the street yet?
surprisingly not, but that would
Not
require
yet.
me to actually go outside. So
Yeah, I feel that on a spiritual level. This week, we have some interesting stuff to talk about, and I think a lot of it's going to come towards the end in the events section because IEM Katowice is going on at the moment, and we actually had a lot of Australian talent there, whether it's Renegades or sprinkled throughout some of these other teams. Some roster moves happened. We sort of alluded to a couple in the past episode, whether it was Dexter or Ali. Some of these things are getting are official now. And we've even seen them debut. And I guess most importantly, and this is our hot off the press news for the week, we're actually on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can find your favorite Australian-focused Counter-Strike podcast in audio form on all your favorite podcasting services.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
big news, isn't it? Let's go.
Oh yeah, clearly this is the biggest news, hence why hot off the press this week, right?
Exactly.
But in all seriousness, no, very happy to get us all on these podcasting apps, get everything right there, because I know a lot of people like to listen to these podcasts and listen to things like that through Spotify, through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. So getting that all done and sorted. Big ups to Swifty over at Snowball, Josh
100%.
the man, for getting that one all done up for us. So yeah, the previous two episodes already live, have been since sometime last week, and this one's going to be going up there at the same time as the YouTube watch. So if you want to go chuck a follow over there so you get notified on Spotify when we have new episodes. Usually we put them out about every 2 weeks, but just so you get that little extra notification so you make sure not to miss anything, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. Or if you're right here on YouTube, if you are watching this on YouTube anyway, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well for Snowball, and ring that bell, as all the YouTubers say, that phrase you've heard a million times before, if you want to hear more from the fine people at Snowball and us.
Exactly.
Of course.
Exactly.
But yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about this week. A lot of things have happened in the last fortnight in regards to where OCE rosters have gone, in regards to a lot of news finally coming through, being official, a lot of matches being played, especially with Kato going on. A lot of really insane stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The biggest one, and I've been doing a lot of player interviews recently, and they all have this sort of similar bit when I ask them about the roster moves, and it's the Dexter to Mouse and how it has had massive ramifications for all of the teams, starting at the top with the Renegades, even affecting Mouse Sports to some extent, but how it's sort of trickled down. We spoke about it last episode in how we think the Dexter move to Mouse is going to go, but having that sort of insight now that we've seen it, we'll get to the more specific breakdown of the game, but I think considering that he's only been with them for a couple weeks, even like 2 weeks, right? There's not a lot we can expect from him in terms of incorporating that system, but he's there, he's playing with Mouse. That's really it. It's going to just be wait and see. They've had the best run out of all of the Australian teams, I guess, if you can call it that, at Kato, though.
Yeah, without a doubt, being able to make it through past the play-ins and get themselves onto the main event, even if they didn't go super far. And we'll get to the specific matches, but it's been interesting to see how Mouse, like, with being this team that is taking on this OCE export in the form of an IGL, which a lot of the time when we'd have these one-off players go to international rosters, there'd be players
never
who
an
are
IGL.
mostly... Yeah, exactly. There'd be players mostly known for their fragging power, people known for like this and that, for just being able to round out the other roles in a roster and come under the leadership of an EU or an AIGL. And now that's been flipped on its head with Dexter. He's got quite the opposite role, where he's leading these 4 players in game that, they are these EU talents that are all sharp and all fraggers and stuff like that. But
yeah,
having to come up with all these things, talking about in interviews as well, how like even just the fact that in little things in like an EU, how in general they tend to call like certain call outs on maps, like different things, like this different kind of vocabulary about like map positions and things like that. And then only having about a week or so to work with these players going into Kato, this massive event. It's not really a fair testament to say like to look at this event and then just judge Dexter based off that. And I mean, that was something where like I was watching it and then seeing like people in Twitch chat all calling like Dexter a bot and this and that. It's like, but in 7 days, do you really expect him to turn Mouse Sports into the next like Astralis era dominating team in 7 days of being the IGL? You got to give it some time.
Yeah, well, that's the sentiment that came, like he, brought with him to the post-match interview. I think it must have been after the Renegades game, because he spoke about, he says a lot of groundwork now. This is like Carrigan left, but his focus is that he wants to create new stuff, new things, and like you just don't have time to do that in your first week. He hasn't, he mentions that the team hasn't gone over a lot of situations yet. The communication factor is obviously a big deal. So in these games, when the rounds look sloppy, when it looks like they don't have a plan, I can't blame him at all. But considering all of this, I think the move with time should be pretty good. Like you've got good enough players regardless. So as long as Dexter even just keeps things basic, I think they'll stay as a relatively strong team.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Like I think that Dexter, there's good reason why he's been picked up, and he definitely has a very good grasp of the game overall. I mean, I think that's something that like kind of goes without saying with people who have been knowledgeable about even just the OC scene for a while, that Dexter has shown himself to be quite this really strong IGL and this really strong figure, right? So it's no wonder he was scouted for EU, right? It's no wonder that even prior to Mouse, he had other teams looking at him, like Henry G even saying like at one point on HLTV confirmed like he only passed him up for Cloud9 because he had in his Twitter bio that he was a father, which is a crazy story in itself. But but now he does have that spot on an EU team, and now we're really going to be able to see like what the capacity of his leading ability is. But again, with any kind of big shakeup like this, you have to give it time, and that's where we can start to kind of lean into the same sort of principle applying with Renegades.
Yeah, and of course, anyone who didn't catch it, Alistair has been brought from Order. This is the domino effect we're talking about. One team has to take from the next. Ali has been plucked out of Order and pulled into Renegades. Pretty much one of the only players I can think of that they could have pulled from, the Renegades, that is. He's played with pretty much all of these players before, except for... No, he's played with Malta. I think he's played with all of these players, whether it was in Chiefs or Order. He lethal AWPer for the last 12 months on Order, and now it looks like he'll sort of become more of a rifle spot. I don't know. We don't know who's IGLing. We don't know if he's going to IGL. But I think my first impressions of Ali in the lineup is that he just looks a little lost at the moment. I don't think they've had a lot of time, and they're sort of just playing. He's just playing in all of Dexter's positions. He's on, the A side on Inferno. He's playing on Sicko, with Sicko on the, A sort of side of Overpass. It sort of just looks like they've said, here's his spots, go. Which I can imagine, getting your AWP taken away from you, getting an AK put in your hands, and just being told, play like Dexter. They're going to need more time, I think. It's not he's played terribly. He did in that first map, but I think...
You got to remember as well that for Alistair in particular, it's been quite a while since he's had any... It's been even long... Like, if you think it's been long since Renegades as an organization or, like, as that core team have been at an international event, Alistair, it's been even longer because the last time he was at an international event, the current Renegades lineup wasn't even at like as it was with those four, with Dexter included.
Yeah.
I remember seeing, I think, him talking just briefly in, I think Inns put up like a vlog from Kato.
Yeah, the last
And
event he went to overseas was the one with Order, and Hats was still on the team. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like that clip in the video where it's just putting into perspective how, even though he is quite a sharp player and has shown himself overall in this scene, everyone else is in the team is that little bit further elevated, I suppose, and developed just because they've had that little bit extra international competition, which is why I'm really keen to see how the next month goes, because obviously, with the Renegades staying in, with them staying at least till past ESL Pro League, which will be starting early March, I believe. It'll be starting in March, but them staying in EU for quite that time, it gives them a lot of space to be able to develop themselves, practice against these teams. Because again, in OCE, and I've said this before, but when they've only been able to scrim for the past year, just teams that have just been around that they constantly shit on,
yeah, the
right?
caliber's not there.
Exactly. So the real test is going to be how Renegades are able to adapt themselves over the coming months, pretty much.
Yeah, 100%.
And with that international experience too, like,
it makes our scene look like a joke, and to some extent it is, right? So obviously, yeah, Ali picked out of Order, Renegades. We've already spoken about this, but Vexite has then gone from the Chiefs into Order, which has then left Chiefs with, I believe it was 2 open spots, and they've officially announced the additions of Gump and Valhalla, or everyone's just referring to him as Val, but I guess that gets confusing with Valiance as well. But what do you think about these 2 additions? I've spoken to Gump and APOC Dud, and there should be a feature coming out in the next couple days that sort of has some interview highlights. But that's the 5-man lineup going forward. And I'm also told that Yam is no longer coaching this squad, so it's just the 5 of them.
I think I haven't seen that much from Valhalla. I know that I mean, he didn't even have a Twitter and stuff like that up until he got signed by Chiefs. Someone that wasn't as known, I don't think, in the OC scene, but has kind of risen up as starting out from this pug style player to being able to just play in these teams, and someone who's been able to get this spot quite quickly. But that being said, like, that's not indicative of someone who doesn't have the experience or anything. That's the fact that it's someone with this kind of talent who's been able to slot into this lineup and is now given this opportunity to prove their worth. And that's where it's going to be interesting, because we're going to be able to see how it goes forward, and we're giving this player a platform to essentially show themselves, right? Giving them more support. So that's with Valhalla. Gump, on the other hand, I think, at least from where I've personally seen, maybe I have a differing perspective than a lot of other people, which is completely understandable. But Gump has absolutely shown himself to be a player that can contend quite well. I remember a year ago, literally, I think I was casting him playing against Chiefs for Road to Rio, and watching him play You Can't Stump the Gump on Skyfire, and seeing all that, and like him just going ham, right, in so many of these games, and then now getting this shot on a top tier organization team with all this support backing him and all this, and you know, he's young as well, and like this young talent that's really fresh to compete and like really eager. You love to see it. That's a pick that is like, it's a really quite a nice thing where it's like you're seeing all this young talent coming up, and we're starting to see this next generation of players going through. Like, there's a lot to unpack there, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Chiefs keep going. But so far, they're doing really well.
I agree. Well, we got to see a little bit of Gump in the DreamHack at the end of last year. He was on a trial basis at the time, but you know, if they've stuck with him, they obviously like what he brings to the team. I've got, you know, I spoke to Tom. It's APOC Dud. In terms of Val, he says he's a really untapped talent. He's going to be absolutely insane. His raw mechanical skill is nuts. So, you know, on one hand, it's the usual talking points. Anytime you pick up a young player, whether it's Vexite or Val, it's always they're young guns, they're sharpshooters. But at the same time, you get in the server and you watch them, and you know they're not wrong compared to some of these other players, right? The big thing with the Chiefs is always they lack the veteran sort of star, like, power to sort of guide the team. The experience is not really there, but I think I do have a lot of faith in Apoc Dud as the IGL and the captain of that squad. So I think fingers crossed and time will tell, as it usually goes with these kinds of squads, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm keen to see it, to be honest.
In other news, I believe we covered Licky and Savage going to Avant, but Avant are no more. I guess this is just a quick one, but the Avant organization has been absorbed. Is that's the technical term for it? By Direwolf. So cool to just sort of have a new name to say. But I don't know. Their logo's pretty cool. Kind of looks like the Vertex one, so that's going to get a little confusing. But
little bit.
Otherwise, yeah, any thoughts on that? I think it is just new org, same players, right?
Yeah, interesting thing here as well. So, with Direwolves acquiring Avant, so that was for all of their teams aside from their league team for League of Legends, because they sold their slot there. But you can go to some other podcast to hear about that game. When it comes to Counter-Strike, that's the first CS team the org has ever had. Direwolves has never stepped into CS until now. So that's quite exciting, seeing new organizations, even in this sense, stepping into CS.
I think they had a random roster back in 2015 or something like that. Not for very long though. I don't know if I'm making that up though.
If they did, they obviously forgot, because in the press release they said it was their first CS team.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with that. But
yeah, I don't know. I felt like I read that somewhere. But yeah, essentially it's like this team hasn't been around in CS. They're not a mainstay name whatsoever. Fact check me on that.
Yeah. Feel free to fact check Ash on that. But
yeah,
quite exciting. Direwolves has had a lot of support from outside brands and things like that. A lot of big sponsors and things going through there, including like LG as their main sponsor. So big organizations stepping in, picking up this Avant roster, which has been looking ever more promising. But we'll get into that in the ESEA Premier updates and all that, looking at some of their games.
Yeah.
But other roster news. Silex looking for one. They posted it up on Twitter that they were looking. Mega posting on Twitter that he was looking for a new player. They didn't say which player was leaving publicly, so
I feel like that isn't very helpful if you're saying
not particularly
I player and not saying what the role is, who it's like.
Yeah, we know it's not the IGL. I'm pretty sure we know it's not the IGL, but Silex at the moment looking for one. So they've made it through a bunch of things, including qualifying for LPL Pro, and they're playing ESEA Premier League at the moment. So yeah, if you're looking for a team to join and you think you're that caliber, hey, send him a message. I don't know. Mako disbanding as well. Another more news from that tier of AU teams. Players are all LFT. They forfeited their Premier slot.
They did. So this is what I was interested in. So all of their Premier games are just FFs now?
That's what, well, on HLTV, we'll get into that stuff when we look at the ESEA Premier, but on HLTV, they're marked as disbanded in the events page for Premier, and I would just assume that they're gonna FF. But yeah, per Cookie's tweet, all the players are LFT, or he's LFT. Mako has decided to mutually disband on good terms. Apparently, because of players having to shift their priorities, that's what was said publicly in that tweet. But
it's very OCE to just sort of blow up the whole team. Yeah.
It happens. You see it a million times in this region, but
probably
it is a shame.
4 times a season.
It's a shame, but a lot of good players on that roster. I'm sure they'll find good homes. Always seems to happen, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as all the roster stuff goes.
Cool. I'm guess
pretty sure that covers it.
That'll whip us into just sort of a quick touching base once more with the ESIC stuff. Without wanting to sound like a broken record, I guess.
Yeah.
There's just some little bits and pieces that have kind of come up in the last 2 weeks that are worth at least bringing up. The big kind of thing that was interesting was LPL not only taking the bans on board, but platform wide. So this affects all of their Valorant stuff. So if you're a player on one of these CS teams handed an ESIC sanction, you can't play Valorant in any of their tournaments. And that's sort of, again, there's a lot of, just like with the bans themselves, there's a lot of this side, that side kind of to that. And otherwise, all we really have in addition to this is MJ coming out a little more. It's Mr. Carmody, just sort of reminding everybody that ESIC is not being painful, but is very under-resourced, very understaffed, and is, as a whole, causing a lot of frustration for everybody, whether it's not getting back in time, not giving the adequate information. So, it's frustrating that it's happening, but there's a reason why it's happening.
I will just also say in regards to the LPL stuff, so in case anyone doesn't know with the Valorant things, and that's understandable, if you want to hear more about Valorant, watch Run It Back, not this, but LPL is running the main Valorant tournament in OCE, the Valorant Oceanic Tour circuit. So the fact that they are applying these platform-wide bans essentially means that it's not just like one TO that's just cutting off some of these players from taking a different career pathway and choosing to play Valorant, including some of the players on this list were already playing Valorant, like completely swapped game anyway. But it's the fact that because they're running this major circuit, which directly leads into their like equivalent of what they're doing for the majors in that game, that's a huge thing for these former CS players and for these CS players who are banned who are looking to try and make it in another game that was somewhat similar to CS, that now they have no avenue though.
Yeah.
So that's some context to add to why that's been such a hotly talked about thing in regards to LPL themselves.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Outside of that, there's talks that some NA stuff that Richard Lewis is chasing up, that ESIC are a part of, might be coming out in the next couple of days, weeks. We don't know. Whether that's going to sort of be the catalyst for the Australian stuff to be resolved, we're not sure.
I hope it is.
I agree. The quicker it can get sorted, the better. But otherwise, this is unfortunately just another wait and see, right?
Well, look, here's the thing. It's been a month now, right?
Yeah.
I remember the first episode we did where the big heading was the ESIC bans, where we said, hopefully next week the players will have their evidence and some more news will come out.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend, it's almost 2 weeks old, the thread now, but go read Michael Carmody's full Twitter thread about the ESIC things. I'm only able to summarize so much because we're not going to spend too much time on it. But
the key line of the quotes, for me.
Yeah.
Oh, no, please.
Yeah. But the key line really is that for most players, zero communication had been delivered outside of their initial notice of charge. Some of them didn't even have those. Yeah. And the fact that it's been so long, they've apparently missed all these dates. I'm just going to say it's fucking ridiculous. Like, the fact that it's been a month now that these players, I know that ESIC are under-resourced, and I know and that there's obvious reasons, but if they can't produce the reasoning as to why they've banned players, then they shouldn't have the players banned at all. It's the fact that should have been ready to go when they dropped the bans. They should have been able to easily prove that any of the players on that list had done the things that they're being accused of. And now these players are being held unable to pretty much go forward. Teams are going forward, making their rosters without them. It's impacting their careers in a huge, huge way and impacting our region as a whole in terms of our view on the international circuit. It's absolutely absurd that it has been so long and there has been such little development.
Yeah.
But yeah, just my 2 cents on it.
No, it's fair.
I think
like
that
a lot of
reflects
people,
a
lot of people share your sentiment. For me, the key line in what MJ talks about is, and I can see this from ESIC's POV, in that I'm sure that they want their next pass. I think word for word he says they want their next pass to be swift and final. In that, I am comfortable if it takes an extra couple of weeks, as long as at the end of this couple of weeks, everything is like there. If they're sort of walking us down this path and at the end they're just going to slowly drip us more and more, it's going to be this long process. Like, tap out of that. But otherwise, it's
I agree
been poorly handled.
I agree that it should be a final pass if they're going to go at it like that. But if they're going to take that long to get all that done for their sake, that's not considering the role that the players actually have, and that's not considering the health of the scene. The problem with banning so many players in this region is the fact that it makes up, and it's been said time and time again, this was such a huge bombshell a month ago, and now the results of this are starting to show themselves in terms of where our scene is going from here, and they have to tread very carefully, because something like this, especially if there were to be more bans to come, with it being handled like this, is something that has the potential to kill this scene.
I agree.
It cannot be done this sloppily. It should not be done to this point where players have sent back counter evidence, apparently, and they've just been like, "Oh no, we have this other evidence that disproves that. Let me go find it," and then not hear a response for 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, overall, it's odd. I think looking at it really far back, regardless of what side you stand on, it's just it's really murky and shit in that sense. But I guess watch this space, because it's I don't know. We'll let you know as soon as we know more, or as soon as more comes out.
Sure.
I guess we'll jump into some happy events, right?
Yeah.
We'll just
Go
hard pivot out of ESIC.
Hard pivot.
I've actually been watching a lot more Premier compared to other seasons, which has been nice. I think this time around, it's the changes to sort of making it a little more important, in the sense that you can go from, because Premier, formerly MDL, now is a very clear path. You do well here, you win here, you get the chance at Pro League. So all the different teams taking it a lot more seriously, because there's a Pro League spot on the line, right? But I've been enjoying the games thus far. We haven't really seen any big matchups yet, like Order and Vertex, which is coming up. I don't know when that's going to get played in relation to when this comes out, but I haven't seen that match yet. And on the other side of the bracket, we haven't seen Direwolves play the Chiefs yet, but that's probably going to be the biggest match on that side. But for the most part, for me, things are going as expected. There's still scuffed rosters, there's still FFs here and there, but the big four, Order, Vert, Chiefs, and Direwolves, they're all doing well. They're going to continue to cruise through, I think. That's essentially my 2 cents worth on Premier. It's, again, just not all the games have been played yet.
Yeah, so for context, we're recording this on the 23rd. That's Tuesday of this week. As far as we know, it'll be released tomorrow on Wednesday, but we're not, that's something that might have changed. So for all we know, this could have come out a bit later, but from the perspective of on Tuesday when we're recording, a lot of different things have happened. So for one, as we kind of alluded to before, Mako disbanding. That means that that's a slot where all of their games are going to be FFs in that group. Control, obviously we knew that because of the bans, that they were continuing to FF. Nothing has been sorted in regards to that roster. They haven't found 3 new substitutes or anything like that. So they're marked as disbanded on HLTV's events page. And we can safely assume that they're not going to get anything together to be able to play games for this season. Now, here's an interesting one. According to HLTV, Bizarre have also forfeited the season, according to the HLTV events page notes. But this roster qualified for ANZ Champs and LPL Pro League, or LPL Pro rather. So unless they're dropping Premier to just focus on the other leagues, not exactly sure if HLTV got this one right. Maybe might have been a mix-up or something like that. Not entirely sure on that one.
If someone wants to reach out and tell us what's going on, that'd be great.
Yeah. If we find anything, we'll put it in the pinned YouTube comments or wherever else. But yeah, for now though, that's something at least. Just a little.
Yeah.
So we'll find out what happens with all of that. As we aired last episode, Wednesday, almost 2 weeks ago, Order made their opening debut. So they played against Silex and got a nice 2-0. And Vexite, he started out, with his first debut match, his first official on Order.
Someone made a good video about that, actually.
I wonder who.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to see a bit more in-depth analysis type thing, if you like that kind of content, like we're doing later for the feature piece, spoilers,
Yeah.
And the last one as well. Go to Ash's own channel where he's put up some of that content. But
Yeah.
or check his Twitter as well. I think he's got it linked there.
It's all on there. Essentially,
you'll find it.
It's just a POV sort of analysis where I wanted to break down Vexite. He's this young star touted to be a very nice replacement for Alistair. Went through, broke it down. Again, watching all these players and their debuts and whatnot, all these new rosters. It's the reason I've been watching a lot of Premier this season. So
yeah, it's certainly made it a lot more interesting just in this particular season with all the things that are happening in OC. To be honest, like it is something where it's made Premier a lot more interesting to watch with all these new roster debuts and things like that.
Especially compared to MDL. Watching MDL used to just feel shit sometimes.
Yeah, and now it feels like with all of this and that, like there's a lot more behind it too, especially with the link to Pro League. But in other roster stuff, Avant / Direwolves, as they now are, but at the time weren't, got themselves a 2-0 win against Chupapi. Not really much to say there other than that's the second game they've played so far. They debuted just before the last episode we did. Keen to see more from Licking Savage for sure. So far, they've held their own in this type of roster. They've played quite nicely. Absolutely love to see it. And yeah, so there's been a lot going on in Premier in general. So a lot of big matches this week too. So as we're recording on Tuesday, there are 3 games going up tonight, which you'll already have the results of because you're living in the future where this episode's out and this is all done and all these games are complete. But we've got apparently scheduled on the Premier website Bazaar versus Paradox. So what one thing there and saying another in regards to what's happening with Bazaar in Premier. But Simplicity versus Rooster is scheduled as well. Caught Off Guard versus Order and Chiefs versus Manaya. So good to see. Order will be interesting to watch as they develop further with the Vexite. More gamers of them. Always a lot of good content to be coming from that, Chiefs with Val and with Gump as well. That's it.
Yeah.
Brain lagged for a second there, but with those 2 players, Chiefs coming into it, going to be very interesting to see how they play with them debuting, or not debuting anything with going in towards that. So very very interesting stuff to see.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, or if you're watching this on the Wednesday, tonight, there's going to be 4 more games as well. Ninja versus Silex, Dynasty versus Really Weird, Animal Squad versus Riot, and Order versus Vertex. And now that final one is the one that really makes me think that's a game I want to watch.
That's probably the first big sort of, upper echelon team matchups we've had thus far. So hopefully that can set the standard
exactly.
for the games going on this season, like all the big games at least. Hopefully that one's good.
Yeah, for sure. And again, Vertex, who have started themselves off with a very good season despite playing with their coach. We don't know at the moment what's happening with their new players or what's going on with them, but hopefully we'll be able to see some big stuff coming out from them pretty soon.
Well, especially
in regards to
considering they've just they managed to get through the open quals for ANZ Champs, right? So I guess clean pivot there. We've got 8 qualified teams now after this weekend. We don't have the invited teams yet, and we were theory crafting who they might be before this episode, but we'll get to that. Last weekend, we had 4 teams qualify through the open quals. Dynasty, Bazaar, Simplicity, and Caught Off Guard. The most recent weekend that just went past, Vertex, Memento, Animal Squad, and Riot. And then we've got another set of, should be 4 more teams this weekend qualifying through a similar bracket of play. And that including the 4 invited teams who, again, don't know yet, will sort of create the field of 16 teams. And to me, it's looking like we're going to have a very similar field to Premier, right? Like a top 6 100%. And then some middle pack teams, and then probably some like not garbage. Like that's not very nice to say, but some teams that aren't quite on the same level who will probably have roster moves, FF games, all that kind of junk, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We're definitely going to be able to see like a lot of interesting stuff coming out from ANZ Champs, but I think the fact that it's starting just that little bit later, almost a month after the whole ESIC situation kind of dropped on us, it definitely means there's a lot more room in terms of rosters to come together and all of that to be shown. So might be a bit of a cleaner season than Premier is running alongside it, but for the most part, yeah, as you said, a lot of overlap, a lot of teams playing both. Um, we kind of see that in the top leagues in this region, kind of something that's not really too unfamiliar, where you have a lot of teams playing MDL, you have a lot of teams then also playing ANZ Champs, and you have a lot of teams playing LPL Pro, and it's just about which ones of those that teams feel that like they can accommodate, which is why you might see some teams in some of these and not others, or little specific things like that. But for the most part, what this means is that we're going to see Tuesday, Wednesdays MDL, Monday, Thursdays ANZ, and we're going to have these teams basically playing throughout the week, right? As soon as ANZ starts up, which means a lot of good CS to be played throughout the week, a lot of good Australian Counter-Strike to watch on top of whatever you're following internationally, right? A lot of great stuff to come forward, and it should be a very interesting season to keep on top of, really.
In terms of the LPL stuff, I can't say I follow it too much because Order doesn't play in it. Order are one of those teams where they mustn't value what LPL has, and Renegades don't play it. So it doesn't feel like something that gets taken as seriously, and thus I don't put as much stock into the games. Can you just give a quick sort of
sure
what's going on with the LPL?
So LPL Pro, the main league, that's what Let's Play Live are offering in comparison to ESEA's Premier and ESL's ANZ Champs, is starting up on March 2nd. So not too far away here, but what has been going on in the meantime behind the scenes is the FFYIs, or the Fight for Your Invite process, where teams in lower relegations have essentially been competing in these little mini tournaments to move up towards the next relegation. So for those unfamiliar, there's challenge. Pro is at the very top, and then you have Challenger, Evolution, Amateur, and Open. Amateur and Open pretty much is where a lot of people get their start, where Amateur you pay like an entry fee, and Open you don't, and people just sign up there. And then past that, it's Invite, where you have to move up through the system, where Evolution is the next step, Challenger is just below Pro, and then Pro is where you have this whole thing. So it's basically like if you imagine ESEA has ESEA Open and LPL has Pro, it's just that if there were different steps in between that to kind of widen out the field and appeal to a wider selection of players. But LPL, just being that kind of tier that gives a lot of players their start in this region for that reason, is still very much so worth paying attention to. They are still doing like the high quality broadcasts, bringing a lot of top casters from the region on board, good production behind a lot of that. And I think even last year they were having television broadcasts on Channel 7, which for OCCS in general, that's actually pretty huge. But with the FFYIs, 4 teams were put through to Pro. So that was Silex, Caught Off Guard, Hazard, and Bizarre were those teams. And they'll be joining in Pro Avant, Chiefs, Paradox, Vertex, Mako, although Mako have disbanded, so not sure what will happen with their slot.
Mako with a question mark. Yeah.
Mako? Orglos, Exto, and Riot are already confirmed for Pro, so not sure what's happening with Mako's slot there, but otherwise, those are the teams that are playing in the top echelon of LPL's divisions. As for Pro, starting March 2nd, but the other divisions have already started as of the time of this episode's release. So if you're looking to go play some CS, sign up at 5. I'm pretty sure you can still get into Open and Amateur as well if you want to do that and start your journey through, of course. And a lot of good CS to be played in the lower relegations as well. But for here, I think we're mostly just looking at Pro, and definitely a lot of interesting CS to be played there as well.
Cool. This is just completely random. Pinnacle Cup, nothing OCE related. I just thought I'd slot this one in here because this is the next event that we know Extrema will be playing in. In terms of the field, it looks very similar to the Snow Sweet Snow kind of cup. Like it's got these sort of weird mid-tier European teams. If we're sort of expecting any return to form for these guys, it's kind of they got to go big here. They got to crush it. But just something super quick to bring up, I guess, because we'll probably bring it up when it actually happens in a couple weeks from now.
Yeah.
And I think that takes us nicely to hopefully, we've done all the nice side veggies, but now we're up to the nice protein of the episode. And for that, it's going to be IEM Katowice, the first big premier event of the year internationally. But the reason we're talking about it here is because we have some of the most amount of Australian talent I've seen at such an event in a very long time. So, JKS on Complexity, he's there. We've got Dexter with Mouse now, and the Renegades lineup's there. We're just sort of missing Extremum, who, because the roster came together so recently, they don't have the ESL points. They weren't invited. But, that's the field. I guess we'll start at the top from JKS and the Complexity journey through the event. They're out. They didn't make it through the play-ins. Spoilers if you haven't watched any of the games. But we'll to cap it all off, they had an opening map loss to NIP. Then they sort of had an expected win against Whistler Krakow, and then in a really, really huge series at the end, they had a devastating 1-2 loss to none other than Dexter's Mouse Sports to decide who goes through. What are your big? Obviously, that last series was huge, but what are your big sort of talking points for Complexity at the moment?
Well, look, for one, just worth noting. So, as for the format with these matches, it was double elimination, where if you lost a game, you'd be dropped down to lower bracket, the round that you were along corresponding with. So, losing 2 games out, and if you won your 2 games or whatever I think it was, then you'd get through pretty much. So with Complexity dropping to lower bracket after the first game, that was on Nuke. That was 16-7 was NIP winning that one. And I think right off the bat, even though NIP have been playing not too bad for quite a while now, they've kind of found their form. That's a bit unfortunate and probably not as close as you'd like to see from Complexity, where they kind of just didn't really let it develop, themselves develop to that point. And Nuke is a point where they did struggle later on. They did take 1 map on it, but overall Nuke wasn't the greatest for them, and we'll see that when we get to the Mouse game. But that was a best of 1, so they dropped down there. Not really much to say other than just pretty good CS from NIP and Complexity not really matching that as much. Whistler Krakow got even still a little bit closer than I think I would have liked to see, especially from some of the players that are on Complexity and the backing they have compared to a team like Whistler. They were able to get themselves a really strong start on Inferno, which was Whistler Krakow's pick on a 16-5 scoreline. Really good stuff there. A lot better play, but largely coming down to a lot of those aim duels and things like that coming out.
Yeah. For me, what doesn't make any sense is Complexity coming off the back of this sort of they just qualified for the Blast Spring Finals.
I think so.
Yeah, they just went through their group against, it was G2, Vitality, and EG, and they go through this Blast event, crush it, they destroy everybody, right? And now you come over here to Katowice, and it's the NIP thing I can understand, right? But it's like, it shouldn't be close against Whistler Krakow. I think if you want to maintain this kind of form, right? For me, the talking points are the inconsistency, obviously with Poison going on and off, but how it's actually really affecting JKS. There's the 2 sides at the moment. A lot of people saying, he needs time. Everyone's going a bit hard on him. But statistically, if you look at how he's playing, it's not up to scratch.
Something's up. He's not slotting into those roles as much as he should be. I mean, as I was saying as well, so with that game with Whistler, that one was Complexity's pick, and somehow it went to overtime
Yeah.
after they'd started up. They actually went down 5-10 in the opening half, and they managed to bring it back, which was really strong. But they just lost out in the overtime. But it shouldn't get to that point where they should have to go
Yeah.
for 10 to 5 second half to then bring it back to that point. It should be a lot closer at the very least, I feel like. And then them getting to nuke where they were able to get the 10 to 5 half to start off with on CT side, and then just close it out from there to 16-9. So they were able to take that series at least. But
Yeah. Before we get into the decider against Mouse, let's quickly get up with Mouse and how they got to that spot as well, because I think the story in that like match against the Cold Mouse story is really interesting. So Mouse, of course, this is intertwined with Renegades. Their opening map was on Inferno. We're gonna get to that in the feature. Actually, there's a lot of stuff there. We're gonna get to Renegades as well. But really sort of, bite all your fingers off. A classic Aussie clencher for that opening map that the Renegades dropped 14-16. I cry. But this then put Mouse Sports up one. So again, win 2, go through, lose 2, you're out. So they then came up against Gambit. And as we're seeing, in hindsight now, looking back, a lot of these CIS teams, Gambit, Spirit, VP, Navi, they're insane right now, and they're all playing really well at Katowice.
Oh yeah.
Mouse Sports run into Gambit again later in the event, but this is their first loss to Gambit in a competitive, but it's competitive in the sense that Mouse Sports put up a fight. It's just I don't think they were ever going to win this series against Gambit. I personally didn't watch the games. But looking back at the stats and how the scores kind of went, somewhat expected for a roster that's just got their IGL right, and that for me that's straightforward. I expected them to win the Renegades, expect them to drop to Gambit. It's just unfortunate that they then had to get matched up against Complexity in this last series.
I will say with the opening game versus Renegades, I think while a lot of people expected Mouse Sports to take that one, I don't think anyone who was thinking that thought it would get to be that close.
Not at all.
Where it almost went to that overtime. It was so close, and then we saw this peak that was just not necessary, losing the 2v2. Just unfortunate. I'm sure that it was largely nerves involved and things like that, and just
it's not even that last round, man. There's a couple rounds they throw where if there's
it's not
4 or 5 rounds where if they go the other way, they win the game. And then there's like 2 blatant examples of if they just didn't fuck it up, it's like at least an overtime. But
100%. But it's like, I think as well with that one, it's like neither team was playing like particularly good CS, to be honest.
Not at all.
Like they were getting their footing initially, and it showed, man. It really showed how like they were both very much so uncomfortable with the roles they were in. They were not as practiced. They were not as in the game, right? They just weren't as in it as a lot of other teams going into this. And in that game in particular, it showed heavily. But again, even still, very close nail biter of a game. Was a lot of fun to watch that one for sure.
Well, that sums it up well. The Mouse's journey. Mouse's journey, right? So they keep going after this. Gambit happens. Get to this complexity game, and I think the scoreline in this doesn't represent the actual story of the game. The scoreline, sorry. It's a 2-1 in favor of Mouse, but for me, it's the second map is Dust 2. This is the series. If Complexity win, they just win. But when Mouse do eventually win Dust after this like ridiculous comeback,
down 8-15,
they run it all the way back and win that map, and it destroyed Complexity. They just didn't know what to do afterwards. They were distraught. It's these echoes of things. We know JKS becomes very emo sometimes. It's not like a rager, but it's like I can see in how they play the emotion sort of leaking out. And for me, watching this Dust 2 game, losing that, lost them this series, it's they didn't play very well on Nuke. It was Nuke, right? Yeah,
it was Nuke.
They didn't particularly play very well on Nuke, but they weren't ever in it to begin with. This series ended on Dust 2, and it ended with Complexity shitting the bed, for lack of a better term.
It's just like, look, they were one round away from just taking that and then qualifying for the main stage. Literally one round away from eliminating Mouse and being able to get through. And they're up 15-8, and then it goes 15-9, then 15-10, and then it goes all the way to 15-15 as Mouse just hold on that CT side Dust 2. And we see A-Core and Rops just going absolutely fucking nuts. Like, the shots they were hitting, it felt like I was watching a frag movie just play out in real time. Like, watching the shit they were doing was incredible. That was one of the most impressive displays of some sharp CS I've seen in a long time, to be honest. But at the same time, that choke from Complexity, it's no wonder they were feeling uneasy going into Nuke. It's no wonder that they went down 16-3, even though obviously it's not the best time to get tilted when you still got that extra map and you can nullify this comeback by just winning the next game. But I mean, look, come on. Even I think if that was to happen to me in a game of matchmaking or Face It or something, down 15-8 and then the other team taking it back that far, even that would just be tilting, let alone at this stakes where it's at this $1 million event. Absolutely
it must have been absolutely crushing, and we saw that. I guess at least for Mouse, it worked out. It was all positive for them, and they got through to the main stage. This one, either team could have gone through, but I think neither team was going to go very far once they got past the main stage. Getting matched up against Astralis as your first matchup, not great.
That's unlucky. That's all you can say.
It was similar to the Gambit in the sense that, like, I didn't expect them to do very well, but they still put on a good showing. I think Dexter actually, like, fragged pretty well in that series compared to the other series. He didn't play particularly well, stats-wise, kills-wise, etc., in any of these games. But the Astralis one was reasonable.
You have to feel bad, though, for that. I mean, getting Astralis, Dexter, his first time IGL an international roster, he gets out through a stage to the main stage, and he has to counter-strike Glaive.
Yeah, it's like, here's Glaive, good luck.
How unfortunate.
And that obviously sent them down to the bracket where they came up against Gambit, and Gambit was much more convincing this time around. They weren't screwing around. They just sent them home 2-0.
Yeah.
And that was the end of Mouse Sports this event. Who got the farthest? They got the deepest into this event.
Yeah, they went the furthest, for sure.
Good on Dexter.
Yeah,
Renegades.
Really good stuff from Dexter overall. Like, I'm keen to see where he goes with Mouse Sports, really.
Yes, I completely agree. The Renegades, give me your thoughts, because in a second we're going to see my feature where I'm going to go into a little bit of depth about what I thought about their games, what's going well, what's not going well. But just in terms of the series and the storylines, what did you take away from Renegades?
Well, look, that game versus Mouse, they did make a lot of mistakes, but the fact that they were able to get it so close, especially against their former IGL, who would be counter-stratting them and would have all this knowledge and stuff like that, some very impressive CS, and it's really good seeing Renegades still being able to compete against some of these international players and get them to this point and to pressure them, right? But them then going against Team 1, taking the 2-1 in the best of 3, where they actually got a 16-4 against an international team. Really nice to see. Taking Overpass as well, 19-17, even though they pushed it into OT. It's still really good. Still really good seeing how they were able to just push themselves through and not get eliminated, going out 0-2 in terms of matches, and staying competitive. But given how VP has been going as of late, where they've been playing some really solid CS, it's just unfortunate that that's where Renegades would meet their end, and unfortunately, not such a close end, but rather down 0-2 with one of the maps, that being their pick of Dust 2, going down 16-3 to send them home.
Yeah, it's rough.
Unfortunate, but again, same kind of thing as Mouse Sports. They're shaking up the roster roles to the point where we don't even know who their IGL is officially and what's happening. Makes me feel like they haven't really sorted that out a lot for themselves.
That's
In a sense where they could just be very much group calling and pugging it. Just having a bit of some of those pre-written strats in, but not really having something so defined in terms of how they're going about it. And I know that will definitely even out, and they'll definitely get a lot stronger as they continue to have this international experience. They're staying in Malta for at least another month, especially because of them having Pro League and just, to get this extra experience. The true test is going to be then.
100%. I go into it a bit on the video here that you're about to see, but the key takeaways for me are the things that they have always been good at, they're still good at. Util damage, they had the best ADR in this stage with just damage nades, so HEs and firebombs and whatnot. They had the best ADR with all that compared to any other teams, and that helps the CT sides heaps. But their T sides are hot garbage. They had so often they didn't really have any kind of clue as to how to approach that. No set plays, but I digress because we're about to dive into that.
Yeah. Anything else to say about the feature piece? You put this one together for this week. Why don't you give us a little introduction before we roll it?
Yeah, I don't think it's similar to my style. I tried to replicate something in terms of what you did because I really liked that. But with my own kind of flavor in how I break down what went well for Renegades and also what needs work. And I do a little intro on the actual package itself, but I think it's really interesting. Keep an eye out for these little things that I've mentioned. The util is something I reiterate a lot. But I completely agree with, I am more interested after the fact in a month and a half from now when they come home, how they're going to improve after more prac, after Pro League, because for now, they've only had a week or two in Malta scrimming. Catch-ins in his streams, he's talking about the teams that they're scrimming, right? I only imagine that's doing them good. But
100%.
yeah, otherwise, I guess we'll take this opportunity to dive right in. So sit back and enjoy this short little feature piece. Welcome to this week's Roundup feature, and the segment of the show where we're going to grab something related to our teams and players and really dive in deep. In the last week or so, we've seen many Aussies fighting it out at IEM Katowice, including the hometown heroes of the Renegades. They had a lot of storylines going into the event, mainly the loss of Dex to their IGL, bringing in Alistair, and it's been roughly about 12 months since their last international play. But what I really want to hone in on here is whether I think the Renegades have what it takes to reintegrate into European play or not, or if there's going to be some teething issues that we can expect going forward. At IEM Katowice, and if you haven't watched it already, it should be a given that I'm about to spoil everything that's happened. They didn't make it out of the play-in stage, so not quite getting into the actual main event itself. And this came off the back of dropping their opening game to Mouse Sports, which put them in the lower bracket, and then eventually they came up against Virtus Pro, who knocked them out. I've picked apart some of the demos that I want to go through, and a combination of things that work and that are positive signs, but also found some things that I feel didn't quite hit the mark for the Renegades and cost them the rounds and maps. But first, let's start with some of the good stuff, beginning with this round here in the opening match against Mouse. Towards A, Hats and Sicko go for this cool setup here in the apartments to try and look for an opening pick, or, should one of them get killed, they're at least in a position where they're able to actually trade it out. While nothing comes of it, this shows that CT protocols are very much in place and that the initiative is there, even if it doesn't necessarily nail them the kill every time. However, towards B, Mouse look like they're looking to finish the round up here, and it's what Inns and Malta are able to do with just 2 flashes and their individual strength around that. Renegades and Inns in particular are touted to be very effective when it comes to the usage of their utility. This is even backed up by their old coach Mitha, who is now actually the coach of Mouse Sports alongside Dexter. And as we see this round and the power of utility, the next round again highlights this sort of idea that Renegades use the utility to their advantage and how it makes their CT side so strong. This round is an anti-eco and it goes after the first pistol where Mousebots are gearing up towards this B push, but Malta and Inns are able to slow down the B control the banana plays with early HEs, and then importantly, these smokes, to which Inns has just deployed the second one. Mousebots are stuck behind it as they're unable to just burst through and get the plant because they don't know where any of the CT players are. Alistair here getting cheated over to this side of the map and deploying the third smoke is what actually deters them from pushing this side at all. Being able to identify when to use utility like this can make a CT side so strong. This is the last example of CT things that are going well, and off the back of losing this B site, it's how Renegades use the information that they have. So they're rotating in Ali, Sicko, and Malta to get ready to retake the B site, but Inns is waiting. Even though they lost the site, they recognize it's taking too long for the bomb plant to go down, and that's because they're not actually planning B. Because Inns knows this and is waiting on the A site, he hears this sound cue, and Ali on short is able to turn and just stop the bomb plant from happening at all. Overall, there actually aren't too many problems with the CT sides of the Renegades for me. Their utility is something that I keep mentioning, and it's top notch to be honest. They were actually the highest ranked team in the play-ins for ADR with util, so their HE grenades and their incendiary Molotov statistics, they're actually doing the most damage per round compared to all the other teams with these nades. But the thing at this event that really let them down was actually their T sides. They only won 31.9% of them and ranked them 14th out of the 16 teams in the event. Before we get into any of the particular rounds that go wrong, I just want to cover this quick T-side round that is an exception. While I don't think there was a lot of meaningful analysis to come from the VP series, just because they're such a league above the Renegades, I think this round shows the potential of the T-sides and their ability to every now and again punish the EU teams. This round is all about Malta. His ability to pull rotations and keep that extra CT player towards the B site is actually what enables the space and time for them to push the A site and really get that window of timing for a bomb plant. Even though Malta goes down, the broken round is already set in motion, and considering it's a 2v4, Hatton and Ali play this quite well, but they're only able to get into this position in the first place off the back of Malta's pressure on the other side of the map, and the call to actually hit the A site with this particular timing. Despite this, there's still a lot wrong with the T sides. I believe it comes down to lack of protocol and time spent catching back up to the European meta just not being there yet, where you can be more punished in the ways that you do things, any mistake you make, and even picking less optimal ways to play out the round will result in you getting punished. In this round, the ideas are there, but the execution just doesn't materialize. And dropping a 4v2 like this is one of those rounds you might look back on and realize it would have made the difference if a couple of these rounds went the other way. Despite early picks and the man advantage, it's almost as if region diff takes over when Frozen and BMAS are in this 2v4. A flash hit from Hats is supposed to land Inns a kill. Not getting this kill actually forces Malta here on the B site to defend against the incoming 2 players on his own. With Alistair running up Banana and able to support with the flash, it really comes up to Malta to get a kill here, but he is unable to. And it puts the CTs into a really tough spot with the 2v2 retake and how the Ts decide to play it out. In the post plan, how Frozen and BMAS play this is really important, and we'll come around to it again later, but they let the CTs make all of the pushes, and as a result, they have to make all the mistakes. It's not up to Frozen and BMAS to peak and lose the round for themselves that way. Again, while all the ideas are there initially for the flashes and how to play the round, it just doesn't materialize. And we see this time again in the mid-rounds here, where Hats towards B gets caught out by re-aggression from Team 1. Hats being the only player towards the B side, it really forces the hand of the A side players who begin to push up short. While this Molotov is good from Alistair, again, re-aggression catches him out. The aggressive play does cost Skulls his life, but it really puts it down into this 2v2, and the ridiculous aggression that comes out from Team 1 just squeezes the T side of Renegades and forces them into many bad spots. Even a simple smoke designed to isolate the T players from one another just destroys Renegades. And finally, this brings us to the final round, and this is a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to what's going on, but it encapsulates a lot of the different things. In the sort of broken round, Sicko and Ali here are looking to push onto the site. This opening sort of kill, I guess, is what brings it down into a 3v2 and makes it a lot more playable. In the man disadvantage, all Mousesports need to do is walk into the site and effectively trade. Thus, I think this initial aggression out of Sicko here is not too bad, considering they need to get it down into a 2v2 so that it's at least more playable and less skewed against them. However, once this kill does come out and it goes into the 2v2, this is where this round differs from the previous one where I showed the Mousesports players in a similar situation. After the fact, they continue to peak, and it's almost as if the nerves or panic is getting to them, despite how low the bomb is to going off. Because these CT players were even so far away, it would have taken so much time for them to get onto the site to get these kills. And I think this urgency to get the round done is what actually loses them the round. Overall, I think a couple of things are clear with what the Renegades need to work on, but given the context of the last 12 months, especially being trapped in Australia and that they've gone overseas before and been successful, I think the pieces are there for them to be able to do it once more. It'll come down to how they handle the loss of Dexter and how much prac they can actually work on before they come home. I guess outside of that, it's nothing more than time will tell here for the boys if they can keep up with the European meta. Cool, and that was the cheeky feature there from me. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Again, hope we can get more packages like that out, and in future look for some interviews with players, people closely tied to these teams and everything that's going on. But otherwise, that's my thoughts on Renegades at the moment.
Yeah.
There's another episode down, I guess. That's episode 3 of Roundup in the Bag. I think
Crazy,
that
honestly.
things are chugging along quite nicely. We've had some good topics, a lot of stuff. We've been very blessed at the moment with stuff to talk about. I won't necessarily say the ESIC stuff was a blessing, or IEM Katowice, all our teams getting banged out being a blessing, but
gives us a lot to talk about, at least.
100%.
A lot of discourse to be had in general around OCE Counter-Strike at the moment, so there's that at least.
And, I think both of us really appreciate all the love and support from everybody, especially considering that we're Snowball's favorite podcast, right?
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah,
easily.
I hope Josh doesn't clip that out. But for more stuff, we're not going anywhere, and keep an eye out for all the stuff that we do. Whether we're casting or doing content here or there, or check out some of the writing that's going up on Snowball in terms of the Counter-Strike content that's coming out.
Yeah, some really good stuff there. Very good.
A lot of really exciting stuff coming out post this episode in the coming weeks that I've got either ready to come out or in the pipeline. But that's everything I've got to plug. Jump in. What's going on your side?
Well, I've been very excited to continue working on this show. It's been a lot of fun seeing people watching it and people getting their kind of fix of OCCS and like learning a bit about the scene and staying up to date through this show. It's been very fun putting all this together and working on it. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes in terms of getting everything up to scratch and up to code for this show. So it's been a lot of fun to put together, and hope you enjoyed this episode. As Ash said, we're not going anywhere. We're very dedicated to continue working on this. So definitely look out for in 2 weeks or so, another episode. A lot more to talk about, I'm sure, as we see the start of these new leagues with LPL and ANZ Champs starting up. A lot of games to dissect, a lot of things to jump into there. Make sure to follow us on social medias at It's2SBS for me on Twitter, and at Shalibo for Ash if you want to hear more from us. We're both doing content outside of this as well. Ash in particular has been doing a lot of the Counter-Strike content, as he said, on Snowball's website, snowballesports.com. So a lot of stuff to check out there. A lot of stuff with Snowball in general, especially if you're into more than just CS.
Hop in the Discord. The Discord just went like live and public to
Oh,
everybody. There's we need to get the CS section in that Discord popping off harder than the League of Legends. So
Yeah.
if in no other way you feel like you can give to the show, help us out by coming and just engaging in Counter-Strike with us, because I'm constantly in there just talking about CS because we love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
But otherwise,
if you feel like you want to follow us on Spotify, any of those, again, give it a second plug. We're now on podcast apps, so feel free to follow us over there too. Like and subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching the video version. But yeah,
awesome.
Hope you
Well,
enjoyed.
that's been Roundup episode 3. Thank you so much for checking it out, and stay tuned for more in the coming weeks.